Girls, don't know if you heard that latest poll. They're popular with the younger generation. I was like, oh, news to me. Very interesting. Generation gap. Okay. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter today. And I'm going to take a bit from about the author in his latest book that we're going to talk about today, The Traveler's Path. And Doug Brouwer did bring a few books if you haven't purchased yours already like I did. But a little bit about Doug. Beginning with family road trips as a child, Doug Brouwer has traveled throughout his life and has written, spoken, and taught about the transformative power of travel. He has led mission trips, pilgrimages, and study tours to countries around the world. And in recent years, he has discovered the joys and challenges of walking solo along the various Camino paths in Spain and Portugal. Doug has been a Presbyterian pastor for 45 years, serving churches in the United States and Europe, including Wheaton, Illinois, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I think the furthest west was in Iowa, perhaps, is what I understand. As a student, Before his retirement, he served for 5 years as pastor of an international congregation in Zurich, Switzerland. He also has returned twice to Europe to serve as an interim pastor, once in Lucerne, Switzerland, and most recently at The Hague in the Netherlands. This is his latest book, The Traveling Path, and Doug is going to tell us a little bit about it today. Thank you, Doug, for being here.
Thank you, Jane. It is so good to be here. I have to say, serving a church in Lucerne, Switzerland is hardship duty. It was somebody had to do that, and I reluctantly put up my hand. It is so good to be here. My wife and I, oh, there you are. We love Hope Church, and I've been supporting the Presbyterian Church here in town, which is why you don't see me quite as much. But we like this church very much, and I know your staff members. In case you're wondering what this is the path, the Portuguese Camino path, where I was just about a year ago today. About 3 years ago, I started to reflect deeply on my travel experiences. And not all of my travel experiences have been in the category of pilgrimage, as you just heard. But this morning, I want to narrow the focus to pilgrimage. We'll see, I think, that some of the complaints about travel can be directed at each form, including each form of travel, including pilgrimage, and we will get to that. So, some of you are going to leave today thinking, I would never go on a vacation with that guy. And just so you know, I do know the value of travel to get away and to read a book on a beach with my toes in the sand. I've done that a fair amount in my life. I see the value of that. But there are other kinds of travel, moving around and then finding meaning in the experience. Phil Castano has written a book called The Art of the Pilgrimage, and he neatly distinguishes between travel and pilgrimage. And what I have in mind this morning is not getting away from life, but encountering life in all of its complexity. That would be pilgrimage. It turns out that Thomas Merton has the best definition of pilgrimage that I was able to find. And curiously, Thomas Merton spent much of his life at a tiny abbey in eastern Kentucky. He is not what you would call a world traveler, although I include a story in the book about a travel he did make toward the end of his life. His superior allowed him to leave the country, and he went to South Asia, had an amazing encounter with religious leaders in South Asia, and I think it was a transforming experience for him, but he didn't have time to reflect deeply and write about it. which is sad. He he describes an inner journey and an outer journey, and I will agree with the last couple of sentences. You can have one without the other. It is best to have both. So, this morning I'm going to be thinking about pilgrimage in its widest possible sense, and I think that maybe the best way to say this is that pilgrimage is going somewhere and then looking for meaning in the experience. You know, until I did the research for this book, I had never heard of the Kumbh Mela. For some reason, this pilgrimage doesn't reach Western newspapers very much, which is shocking because 400 million people participate in this every 12 years or so, somewhere along the Ganges River. And the only reason it appeared on the front page of the New York Times back in January is that there was, I think it used to be called, the preferred term now is crowd rush. There was a crowd rush and dozens of people were either killed or injured. And that warranted a front page story in the New York Times. Not the gathering of 400 million people, but some deaths along the way. The Kumbh Mela not only attracts 400 million people or so, but it involves a number of rituals along the Ganges River, which we might recognize as baptism rituals. So there's a distinct religious dimension to the Kumbh Mela. I feel like I'm standing too close to the camera. This is my better side. Yeah. Moving on to another world religion, there are no travel requirements in Christianity, but there are travel requirements in Islam. Every adult male who is healthy enough and can afford to do it is required to make a visit to Mecca in Saudi Arabia at least once in a lifetime. I love this photo, and I think that's why I use it here. Pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars or norms of Islam. And I find this curious. A growing number of women are participating in the Hajj. And the last date I had figures for was 2021. But 40% of the pilgrims in 2021 were women, and they were not necessarily accompanied by a male. So Islam is becoming woke. Thank you for laughing at that. Judaism, the oldest of the 3 Abrahamic faiths, I think started this idea of going places and finding meaning in the experience. And I'm going to throw this one, this is not an historic pilgrimage, but it's developing into quite an important one. Birthright Israel is something that Israel does to encourage young people, young adults, to be aware of their Jewish identity. All right, and I thought I had a number, 850,000 young adult Jews from around the world have participated in Birthright Israel. The more traditional pilgrimage experiences are these, and my favorite story in all of, this is not really true, but favorite story in Scripture is in Luke 2, where Jesus and his family go to Jerusalem to observe the Passover, and then they leave, and I forget how far they walk, and they look around and say, "Where's Jesus?" They had left him behind in Jerusalem, and they journey back and discover him still in the temple. However, among the 3 Abrahamic religions, it's clear that Christianity has the largest number and most visited pilgrimage destinations. And it's Roman Catholicism in particular that leads the way on pilgrimage. Before moving on to Christian pilgrimage, and that's really my focus for today, I want to say a word how pilgrimage, I believe, is a near universal phenomenon. There is a near universal motivation in the human spirit to make a pilgrimage, and I'll come back and defend that statement in a bit. Please laugh at this. how else do you account for the fact that 600,000 people a year travel to Memphis to see Graceland? Quasi-religious experience, okay. And then in a similar kind of way, at least that many, if not more, people visit strawberry fields in Central Park, which is a few steps away from the Dakota where John Lennon was gunned down. Again, going somewhere, finding meaning in the experience. Burning Man. Each year, I think the number has not caught up to pre-COVID numbers, but each year 70 to 80,000 people gather in a desert space in Nevada. And I made the mistake in a previous presentation of saying if you like to run around naked in the desert, you'd love this. It turned out that somebody in the audience had done it and had found considerable meaning in it and was offended by my comments. So no more negative comments about Burning Man. But this is an example, I believe, of the near universal human urge to go somewhere and then find deeper meaning in the experience. I don't know what to do with the Chinese New Year. And yet, a lot of people set out each year and go to hometowns, right? And they participate in rituals. I suspect that the Chinese New Year is a kind of pilgrimage. No one here has participated in Chinese New Year, okay. Oh, I should have guessed.
People go home.
Yes.
It's not a pilgrimage, it's going home.
Okay. Did you hear it's going home? And I think a lot of what, yes, this is like going to Grandma and Grandpa's at Christmas and, yeah, okay. Yeah. Here's one that I knew nothing about. Australia achieved its independence in 1901. It became the Commonwealth of Australia. But some scholars say it wasn't until the First World War that Australians achieved a sense of national pride, a national identity, and that occurred because they fought alongside the British in a losing battle in this at the Dardanelles Strait. And if you go there today, it's a cemetery, there's a memorial, but apparently young adult Australians are visibly moved by the experience of having gone there, and they feel a sense of national pride. Probably not unlike going to the cemetery at Normandy, right, and seeing 9,000 headstones there, and then reflecting on the meaning of that. Okay, the point is, lots of people around the world are going places, and they do so with a wide variety of motivations. Does anyone know Agnes Callard? She's a professor of philosophy at the University of Chicago. I had no idea that anyone hated travel as much as Agnes Callard hates travel. I came across this article in the New Yorker, and it's not behind the paywall, so it's accessible, and I recommend it to you. Agnes Callard detests every form of travel. She says that travel and locomotion are synonyms. Travel amounts to no more than locomotion. Most of us are very proud of ourselves as travelers. We like to brag that we've gone places and seen things, and we've come back better people. She thinks that's hogwash. I'll give you one quick illustration of this. Someone said to her one time, I'm going to France. And she said, terrific. Where are you going to go in France? I'm going to Paris. Oh, really? And what are you hoping to see in Paris? Well, we're going to the Louvre. And what are you hoping to see in the Louvre? Well, the Mona Lisa, of course. And then Agnes Callard writes that on average, people spend about 15 seconds in front of the Mona Lisa. And as you know from having gone to famous museums around the world, there's enormous pressure to keep moving, right? There are crowds, and especially at peak times of the year. I think she's onto something. I think that her critique of travel ought to be considered. And we'll get into some of this in a minute. A lot of the critiques that she offers can be made about pilgrimage as well. So here's a full disclosure story. I think we have time for this. After I read her article, as I was doing the research, I emailed her. If you're a professor at a university or college today, your email address is available on the internet. So I found her email address. I said, I'd love to interview you for my research. No response. So 2 years later, the book was completed, and I wrote to her again. I said, really, I think I've done some appreciative engagement with your writing. Will you talk to me now? I'd love to get an endorsement for my book, a blurb for the back cover. Well, within an hour, she wrote back, wanted to know more about my appreciative engagement. And so I sent her a PDF of the manuscript. And within 24 hours, she had written back, had read the manuscript. She said, I don't do cover blurbs as a matter of personal policy, but she said, I think you've captured my argument. I think you've stated it well, which I took it as a compliment. So, what's the problem with pilgrimage? How much time do you have? There are a lot of problems with pilgrimage. It's expensive. Getting on a plane and flying to Spain or Portugal, that's expensive. It's time consuming. Unless you're retired, it's very difficult to to find a month to walk the most popular of the Camino paths. Who can do that? Quite a few thousand people each year, but still, who can do that? I think it's worth noting that 80% this is another put down of Burning Man participants, 80% of them are white and privileged, much higher than average annual income. Here's a sense I have. I don't know how to measure this. I think a lot of people will think of walking these Camino paths as adventure travel. So it would be similar to climbing Mount Kilimanjaro or I don't know, what are they? Oh, I once had a fantasy about walking to the Everest Base Camp. I thought I could fly into Kathmandu, walk to Everest Base Camp. That's something I don't think I can do that today, but 5 or 6 years ago, I think that was possible. I think for a growing number of people, the Camino is adventure travel. Martin Luther certainly had his criticism of pilgrimage. He was blunt about everything, and he was blunt about pilgrimage. I think his concern was that pilgrims were looking for God's approval. People engaged in pilgrimage activity in order to earn God's favor, and as you know, he wanted no part of that. Well, as a result of Luther's comments, pilgrimage basically came to an end in the Protestant portions of Europe. And I can't resist telling his joke. A number of the cathedrals in Spain claim to have been built over where apostles' remains were discovered. So Santiago de Compostela, which is the goal for Camino walkers, claims to have the remains of St. James. So here's Luther's joke. There were 12 apostles, but 15 of them are buried in Spain. Thank you, Martin Luther. Steve and I had a conversation about this before the class began, and I said, so much spiritual activity, so much rich spiritual activity was lost in the Reformation, right? And for the sake of, well, Luther's theology and Calvin's theology and so on. Beyond the matter of privilege, these pilgrimage destinations are overrun with pilgrims. I'm mentioning Lourdes here. It's a town of 15,000 people, but they draw 500,000 How much? They draw a lot of pilgrims each year. Think of tulip time never ending. For a community like Lourdes, it's tulip time every single day of the year. I have another story about the Santiago de Compostela, where I've walked twice now. There's a wonderful university there, and the university is struggling because it cannot find enough student housing. So if you are a property owner in Santiago de Compostela, who do you want to rent your property to? A person like me who's going to pay a lot for two nights there, or to a student, a poor student? And the choice is obvious if you are a property owner. And the result is that the university there is struggling mightily. So I do think that at this moment I thought of walking the Camino as adventure travel. I arrived at the cathedral, had my picture taken, and I was about as proud of myself as I have ever been. And then it was the Pilgrim Mass in the cathedral after arriving that sort of redirected my attention to what I had actually done. So I walked for 28 days. I started on the French side of the Pyrenees in a little medieval village called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. Walked for 28 days. I took one day off. I think if I had walked with a friend, I might have taken a rest day here and there to explore. But every morning, I just got up and went. Averaged a little over 17 miles a day, which seems unbelievable to me right now. And then once I arrived in Santiago de Compostela, I had no desire to prove anything more to myself, but many people just kept going. I mean, they wanted to go all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. I took a bus and then put my toe in the ocean. So the Pilgrim Mass, actually, to be truthful about this, there were masses just about every night along the way. I would stop in small villages to stay overnight, and there would be pilgrim masses, and I went most nights. Didn't understand a word of what was said, but the people were thrilled to be worshiping in the community of other pilgrims. So here's the interior of the cathedral, and the reason I'm showing you this is the Botafumiro. Did you get to see it swing? Oh, it doesn't swing every day. So on my first Camino, I did not see it, and then last October I got to see it. When 400 or 500 pilgrims arrive for noontime Mass, after not having bathed for a month, there's quite an odor in the at least there. I mean, I showered every day, but you know, a few centuries ago, people would arrive and there would be quite an odor, and that's where this custom began. This Botafumiro was a way of deodorizing the church. Can we watch my little video here?
I'm not qualified to do that.
Oh, there it is. It takes 6 or 7 brothers to get this thing moving, and everybody seems to focus on this as the highlight of the worship experience. So here's a map of Spain and Portugal, and as you can see, there are a web of Camino paths. The path I took started here, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and then moved across all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Last October, I flew into Porto and walked north. That's 170 miles, so much shorter. But I met people on my walk who would just choose a different Camino path every summer and then take off. There are other pilgrimage paths. One of the other best known is the Via Francigena. I have a seminary classmate who walked a portion of this. He started at the Alps and then finished in Rome for Easter. And I have to say, walking through Tuscany in the spring sounds very, very nice. Having lived there, I think crossing the Alps would be very difficult, a challenge. So the Via Francigena begins in Canterbury, cathedral town in the UK. Are any of you aware of this? Okay. Most nights, I gave myself a treat, occasionally a bathroom to myself, but most nights I stayed in albergues, pilgrim hostels, men, women, and sometimes children, sleeping very close together. And we got to know each other very well. I'll just leave it at that. But as I said, I did give myself a treat once in a while so that I could have a bathroom to myself and do some laundry and so forth. But this is the pilgrim experience, to walk together and then to spend evenings together. Amazingly, people found their way to Santiago de Compostela for centuries without GPS. It's astonishing today, and the reason they were able to do it is that there are yellow arrows everywhere. I think this is a remarkable. I think this is a remarkable phenomenon in a way. I once preached a sermon after my first experience about how we could be yellow arrows to each other. I thought that was very clever. But a goal of the spiritual life is to be a yellow arrow for you. Let's see. Oh, and in cities, this became very, very difficult to find your way. There were Camino symbols often in the pavement. But whenever I lost my way, I would ask a local where Santiago was, and everybody knew where the path was, everybody I talked to. So I don't think I ever got lost or walked more than a couple hundred yards out of my way. So, okay. Nearly every person I met along the way would say to me, I'm not doing this as a religious thing. I'm not Catholic. I don't think that I'm a spiritual person. That's not what this is about for me. Right? Okay, and I think they went out of their way to explain that when they found out I was a Presbyterian pastor. But then, toward the end of our walk, we came upon the Cruz de Ferro, which is the highest point in terms of altitude along the path. And in the 1500s, as you can see, this cross was erected, and pilgrims who do some reading about the pilgrimage before they leave home know that they should take a stone or a rock with them. And the idea is that you walk to the cross and you lay down your burden at the foot of the cross. There's often prayer at that point, and then people keep walking. Every single person in my Camino family participated in the ritual. These non-religious, non-Catholic individuals, proudly non-Catholic, participated in the ritual. And that was eye-opening to me. And what it said to me was, I think we human beings long for these experiences. We long for these rituals. And we almost instinctively know what they mean. Walking to the cross, laying down a burden at the cross, reflecting on what that was, and then moving on, I think that's, deeply meaningful. I cheated. My backpack was 20 pounds. I took a little piece of driftwood from Lake Michigan. So I couldn't bring myself to put a rock in my backpack. So somewhere on this pile is a piece of Lake Michigan driftwood. I have to say, not only was this the high point in terms of altitude, this was one of the high points along the way for me. I left early every morning, but then, there are so many early risers in these albergues. Everybody wakes up whether they want to wake up early or not. I took a self-portrait just to show how low in the sky the sun was when I left. Okay. I want to tell you about the high point for me. It wasn't just the Crucifero. The ritual of that, of course, was very, very meaningful. But the most significant part of the experience for me, and I'll be curious to know what the two of you have to say. The most powerful part of this experience for me was the people I met. I met very few Americans. Maybe we'll have time, I can tell you about the two I did meet. Yeah, there's a story there. But the other people I met were from all over the world. I'll introduce three of them to you. These people became my Camino family, and we walked together for hours and hours. This man here was a headmaster at a school in South Africa, and one of my clearest memories of him is that he knew a lot about wine. So, and to hear him talk about wine all day long made me thirsty during the day. And we did walk through some wonderful wine regions of northern Spain too, but a fine man. This young woman here is from Estonia, and one evening in the albergue, I saw that she was doing stretching exercises between the bunk beds. I probably should have done that too. But then I realized she had cerebral palsy. For me to walk 500 miles, it was nothing compared to the effort that she had to put in. Her training put my training to shame. So I'm not proud of this, but when I first realized that she was struggling with cerebral palsy, I said, oh, what do you do back in Estonia? And she said, well, I own an accounting firm. And it was then that I realized I was in the presence of a remarkable person, right? Someone who was exerting far more energy and so on this walk. We had some amazing conversations. And then the man out ahead is his name is Sebastian, from Chile, a Jesuit priest. When he completed his PhD in biblical studies, his superior ordered him to go to Siberia and found a seminary. And so he spoke, his native language was Spanish, he spoke excellent English and French, and when he moved to Siberia, he had to learn Russian. And I'm told that for people who speak several languages, each additional one is easier to learn than the first. I'll have to take somebody's word for that. Anyway, I said to Sebastian, you know, I'm a Presbyterian. When we move to a new position, we apply for it and have an interview and negotiate a salary. And he said, Doug, I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And when my superior says go to Siberia, I go. And he went and worked very, very hard for, 15 or 20 years. And this was his sabbatical. He got the seminary established, and then he took a month to think about what he had done with his life. I can't resist telling one more story about Sebastian. I was sitting with him in a little village church one evening for pilgrim mass, and during the homily, he was grumbling. And have you sat in church with someone who was grumbling during the sermon? I didn't know what he was saying, but I didn't know what the preacher was saying either. But Sebastian was grumbling about it, did not like it. And afterward, I asked Sebastian, what was going on there? I don't think that he used these words, but the priest was phoning it in. He had not put much effort into it. And it was then that I realized that Sebastian set very high standards for his students. If you're going to be a student in my seminary, you're going to be as good as you can be. And he too, like my friend from Estonia, turned out to be one of these remarkable people I was glad to get to know. I think we do have time. I want to tell you about the two Americans. I flew into Paris, took 2 trains to get to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. On the second train ride, it was from Bayonne to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, a short train ride, I met this American couple. And we had enough time to ask the usual questions. What do you do for a living? And anyway, I'm forgetting his name now. It doesn't matter. Well, okay. He was a colonel in the Special Forces back in the U.S., so had served in a number of places around the world. And frankly, I thought he was scary. He told me very short stories about some of the missions he had been on, and I thought, oh, I'm going to, keep my distance from you. But he was a very, anyway, very interesting person to talk to. I'm glad I met him. So next day, I should have taken a rest day in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. I was dehydrated, jet lagged, tired out. I should have just spent the day window shopping in Saint-Jean. I know you've heard this story many times, but there was no holding me back. So the next morning, I was up early, heading up the Pyrenees for the largest one-day elevation change along the way. It was, anyway, almost 6,000 feet to get to the top of the Pyrenees where I was going to spend the night. Well, I did not make it. I would walk 20 feet and then I would just lean on my hiking poles. I had nothing. The sun was going down, my options were narrowing, and I rolled out my sleeping bag next to the path. And for those of you who know me, you know that I hate camping. I was scared. I thought that all the predators in the Pyrenees had been hunted to extinction, but I did not know that for certain. So, I mean, clearly I survived the night, but that was one of the scarier nights of my life. I got up the next morning, humbled, had the next 28 days to think about what this said about me. Anyway, I walked into Roncesvalles, there's a monastery at the top of the mountain. I walked to the monastery where I thought about having breakfast. And who should I run into but Colonel Jack Dills. Doug, it is so good to see you. Wraps his arms around me and I said, Jack, I just spent the night on the ground. And he said, well, let's go in and have breakfast. And his wife came in at that point and we ordered our breakfast and he took my hand and his wife's hand and he prayed for me. God bless this young man. He thought, God bless this young man. It was wonderful. I was weeping. So this scary Special Forces guy took me into his arms at a vulnerable point in my life. It was really, really quite a good memory. Enough on the people I met?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how many of you have read this book. Maybe you've seen the movie with, is it Reese Witherspoon? This is a remarkable story. Cheryl Strayed, her last name, her surname is one she gave herself because it describes her life. So before she set out on this walk, she made what we would call some unfortunate decisions with her life. And one of the motivations for making the walk was to think through what she had done and what she wanted to be in her life. The story is a remarkable one. She started near Mexico, ended near Canada. And she did, in fact, sort out her life on this walk. I recommend the book to you, and the movie is not bad either. This is Pilgrimage. Henry David Thoreau. I'll bet you didn't expect to see him on my slideshow. He famously spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days on the property of his buddy Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he never really wandered farther than the pond where he lived. He made some trips into town to buy groceries. Other than that, he spent this period of time walking with his eyes open. And as you know, if you've read his book, he saw a lot. He saw inside himself. He saw the world around him. This was a remarkable book. I think I read it in high school, and I had no idea that there were stories like that out there. Annie Dillard wrote her master's thesis about Walden. and then did her own pilgrimage. She never walked more than 2 miles from her home in Roanoke, Virginia, but like her mentor, I guess, her mentor, Henry David Thoreau, she walked with her eyes open. She explored what was going on within herself. She explored what was going on in the natural world that she observed, and this was the product of her walking. This book also had a profound effect on me. I think for about 10 consecutive weeks, I quoted from it in a sermon. And some wise church member, think about this, some of you should be called upon to do this maybe. Some wise church member should have taken me aside and said, Doug, do you read other books? But for a while, a stretch in my life, this became a very powerful book in my life, only because I think she was moving in the world with an open heart and an open mind. She was observing carefully. I think I'm going to stop here, pause here, and then ask you some questions. One of the reasons for stopping with Annie Dillard is this fear I have that when people think about pilgrimage, they think they have to travel a long distance, go to an exotic location, and so on. And what I had learned earlier in my life was that you don't have to go very far at all to engage in what we would call pilgrimage activity. Susan and I live fairly close to Lake Michigan now, and each of those walks, if we set an intention before the walk, each of those walks can be a pilgrimage kind of activity. This was a redirection in my life. I don't have to fly to Spain or Portugal to have a genuine pilgrimage experience. I know you're going to speak next week, the two of you, but I wonder if you could tell people where you've been and which path you walked.
Okay, sure.
Oh, yep. Suzanne and Bob. And I should mention that Suzanne is the daughter of my childhood pastor. We have a connection.
Bob and I did the Camino Francis about 3 years ago, the same one that you are talking about, Doug. And Marlon Viss is here in the room, and we did it with Marlon and Sally Viss. So we had, and my sister Leanne, there were 5 of us that did that. Marlon and Sally did it the way you did, the
Slept
whole
on the
thing
ground?
walking without a rest. No, not this, the whole way walking without a rest. Leanne and Bob and I did the first 200 miles walking, and then we took a bus 100 miles, and then we biked the last 200 miles. So we kind of condensed it into a 3-week experience.
Okay.
No, yeah, a 3-week experience rather than 4 weeks. And then a year ago, we did the Portuguese Camino as well, the same one that you did, from Porto to Santiago de Compostela.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we did that with my sister Leanne and Marlon and Sally and another couple. So that was a slightly larger group.
Thank you. Your mention of the bike, I reflect on this in the book a little bit. In making a pilgrimage, I think we discover some unattractive truths about ourselves. So when a bike would sail by, I'm surprised I didn't shake my fist and curse. These paths are kind of narrow, and sometimes we have to share them with farm animals, and so I'd see a bike go by. But I did reflect on this, and I thought, there's no right or wrong way to walk a pilgrimage. I have this sense that there's a right way to do everything. That's the way I was raised. And the pilgrimage revealed that about me, and I've been trying to work on that. So is taking a bus a problem? No. Everyone does the pilgrimage in a different way. I thought I was cheating by staying in a small hotel.
Judgment there, Doug.
Yeah. Oh, I can judge myself all day long. Anyone else? Just to alert you, we're going to have a panel discussion next week, and we're going to talk about what the panelists thought about before they made their pilgrimage. We're going to talk about some of the highlights of their own walking. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is some of the takeaways, how the pilgrimage has changed them. All right. So I'm wondering if anybody else here has had even a quasi-pilgrimage experience. Yes.
Yes, and it's a way of asking you a question, Doug, about your definition of what defines a pilgrimage.
Right.
So I've spent 3 years in Scotland, and during that time, I've had the great experience of walking the West Highland Way over 8 days with my kids and meeting lots of interesting people, exactly as you described. Right. I've also periodically driven to Iona, which is the birthplace of Christianity in my ancestral land of Scotland. Were either of those pilgrimages, or is walking intrinsic to a pilgrimage? What defines a pilgrimage, and what isn't a pilgrimage? The examples you gave, including Annie Dillard and Walden Pond and walking the El Camino Way, all involve physical activity and walking. Right. So my question is, what is a pilgrimage?
Well, as I said closer to the beginning, I think that moving around and then finding meaning in the experience, and what Merton called an inner and an outward journey, bringing them together, I think that would be my definition. Is walking necessary? Well, sometimes you can bike it yes, I think there needs to be some movement. I think we have to get out of our home. So let me put it this way. I think that my pilgrimage, my first Camino, actually began when I walked out the front door of my house. I mean, I had that sense about what I was doing, that from this point, I was going to be extra aware of the people I met. And so I think that's enough about that. But I think that is just about, I think that going to the store and buying groceries can be a pilgrimage experience if you set the intention ahead of time that this is going to be this could be an important experience in my life. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I did walk the last 100 miles of the Camino into Santiago, and then part of the Porto section in a different year. Both of the times I went with a small group of women friends, women friends, and it was a very wonderful experience as it bonded us together in ways that a friendship prior to that was different. And since returning twice, I've built labyrinths, once at a church and once in a field near our house. And that is absolutely a pilgrimage because you enter a labyrinth with an intention and you're walking slowly to that center point and maybe spend time there and then out again. So that was the at-home pilgrimage experience as well as the hiking ones when I was much younger.
So once again, it depends on movement, right? Even though it's in a circumscribed area. Yeah. You raise an interesting issue, the 100 miles. So most pilgrims carry a pilgrim passport with them, and in the evening they get a stamp, and maybe if they stop in a restaurant along the way, they get a stamp. And then at the end, the pilgrim office looks very carefully, more carefully than I expected, at my pilgrim passport to make sure, I don't know, that I didn't fly back to the United States in the middle of it, I don't know. But she looked at my passport very carefully, and then we were given a Compostela, so a certificate of completion at the end. But 100 miles would be the minimum to get did you get it? Good.
Yeah, I have just a thought here too, if we can. I was thinking about Dave's question here, and so this isn't thought out very well. But the thought is, I wonder if the most powerful pilgrimages are unintended and somewhat unconscious at the start. As a very young man, heading off, finishing my first year of professional work after college, I put the backpack on and did what a lot of us did in the 70s and 80s, and I went around Europe. And I think in some ways, it's if we recognize that God is in all places and fills all things, as the Orthodox would say, and if we recognize that we're really positioning ourselves for maybe a sort of divine serendipity, that we're encountering nature in humans, And without the travel, without the movement, you're not as positioned. So it's a great exposure, and also based on the belief that creation is extraordinary, and those who are created are extraordinary. It occurs to me.
That was beautifully said. Thank you. So before doing this the first time, I don't think I was quite there, but now that I've had this experience, I can go to the grocery store. It's not quite that mundane, but I can go to the grocery store and think something could happen here that will be life-changing. I could meet someone who will have an impact on my life. Right? Yeah.
Just as a follow-up to both Jim and you, I just asked ChatGPT what a pilgrimage is, and it's very much of what you said. I mean, its answer. I mean, it gives an example of spiritual pilgrimages, but it says it's any purposeful journey to a place of deep personal meaning, whether religious or secular. So it could be religious, or it could be the birthplace of an ancestor, the site of a historic event, or the home of a beloved writer.
The cameraman.
Yeah, I would be one who would broaden the definition of pilgrimage to include it's not broaden the definition of pilgrimage. I don't know why it's not on. I can't even see it. Yeah, there we go. To include the road trip. And in some sense, a long road trip is very similar. Lots of opportunities for contemplation. In fact, recently watched the movie called Will and Harper. Very much a pilgrimage. So if anyone's had a chance to watch that, it's pretty interesting what their friendship goes through on this East Coast to West Coast car ride. So
Yeah, that's a remarkable movie. I would opt for the widest possible definition of pilgrimage.
I would say that for me, you're making me rethink 3 major trips we took in retirement, which was not only to national parks, but also reconnecting with people we had known throughout the years, no matter where they lived. And so we went to the Southwest, the Northwest, and the East Coast from here. And I'm thinking about that. Particularly reconnecting with people, family, as well as seminary friends, college friends, and so forth. So I appreciate hearing what you have to say about this.
I think the reason it was such a revelation to me is that I was raised in a Reformed theological tradition that did not want to think much about the experiential part of being a person of faith. Faith was something we thought about, read books about, discussed and argued over. But I think that the discovery of pilgrimage has been that it can be richer and deeper than that. I'm grateful for my background, but I think things have expanded a little bit later in life. You look like a pilgrim, Steve.
First, Doug, I did enjoy your book. Found it really insightful, helpful. I'm going to have to go back and read the article about the case against travel. I'd like to see what the author has to say. But my question is, can there be any beneficial aspects to travel?
Well, okay, yeah, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't.
What might those be? What might those be?
You know, I'm going to give you a story. At noontime, the church I served in Zurich, Switzerland, was downtown, and it was within walking distance of the Grossmünster, where Zwingli once preached. So this was a major tourist area. And while I was walking at lunchtime, I would see buses of tourists go by, often American tourists, faces against the window and so on. I felt like an animal in a zoo. I wanted to say to these people who were riding by in a bus, get off the bus, engage with people on the sidewalk, ask us questions about our lives, find out what life is like here. But I've taken a number of trips like that where I rode down the street in a bus and thought I saw a place. travel can be much more than it often is, but it requires engagement with the culture and the people and so on. Here's another story. The first time I took a church group to Israel, yes, we saw the Sea of Galilee, which is lovely, and yes, Western Wall, all the major sites that you would expect to see on a Holy Land pilgrimage. But the takeaway for me from that first pilgrimage was meeting Palestinian Christians, discovering that 5% of the population is Christian, and they have this very unusual history and tradition. I mean, yeah, I'm so glad I saw the Sea of Galilee, but the lasting memory was this group of people.
And the comment about, traveling in benefit, it takes me back to a quote by de Tocqueville, that you cannot understand your own country until you travel abroad. Because then you can compare, you see the benefits, you see the warts and everything else. And so I think that is the benefit of pilgrimage, is you understand your own world more.
I'm in complete agreement with that. If you read Agnes Callard, you'll find that she does not agree with you about that. She quotes a number of British thinkers and philosophers, and they're all the people she quotes are united in thinking that all travel did for them was to make them appreciate home that much better. They had no desire to go back to these other places. I happen to be in agreement with you. Okay, anybody else? Because next week I really do, I'm going to run this panel with an iron hand, and but we are going to talk about leaving home with an intention. What is it that we're setting out to do? What do we expect to do? And sometimes what we intend to do is not what happens at all. And then what happens along the way, and then finally the takeaways from our experiences. Yeah, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Oops. Supposed to pass this to you. Oops. Yes, I can tell you, some of you know, we were just recently in Hocking Hills, Ohio, doing some hiking with Terry and Cindy and another couple. And I was going to bring it today. I have this hiking t-shirt, talks about hiking, and it has this long list of the benefits of hiking, talking about rejuvenation and all of these, but it's quite the shirt. And a woman, we were in Grandma Faye's General Store. I can highly recommend the chicken salad there. But at Grandma Faye's, a woman stopped me because she wanted to read my shirt. And she's, wait. And she's reading my shirt, and she's like, yes, that's what hiking does for me. Talking about the rejuvenation and being out in nature and the positive experiences. So yes, meeting people because they're reading your t-shirt or whatever it may be. It is an adventure. Thank you, Doug. I will say also at the conclusion of Doug's book, he talks about the hymn, I Was There to Hear Your Morning Cry, which we sing here at Hope Church, and I know many of you also enjoy. We were also, after Hocking Hills, Larry and I flew to Maine to attend the memorial service in Maine for Ken Bradsell, some of you know. And this was turned out to be one of Ken's favorite hymns. And so we sang it at his memorial service. And you talk about the line that intrigues you, when the evening gently closes in and you shut your weary eyes. I'll be there, as I have always been, with just one more surprise. And so we look forward to some more surprises today, next week. And I hope all of you have a surprise as well today and in the days to come. But thank you, Doug. Yes, in addition, I should say also on page 14 in today's bulletin, you can read about next week. And in addition to Bob and Suzanne Jordan joining Doug, Marlon will also be present on the panel, as will Phil Duskett and Larry Mulder, who have done portions of the Appalachian Trail. And so they will join us all next week to talk about their experiences too. Thank you, Doug. Oh, yes. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have that written down right here. It's Pizza Sunday, so we need 3 rows of 5 tables each with 8 chairs around each table. Please, and